Hi, I'm Brendan Davies, and I'm the current Australian Ultra Runner of the Year, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
And the winner is...
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Listeners, welcome to another episode of the Physical Performance Show. I trust you've been having a great week, and I hope you've been enjoying pursuing your physical best. On today's episode, we explore the second of the Ultra Trail doubleheader. Last week, we featured up-and-coming Australian Ultra Trail running sensation, Lucy Bartholomew. And today, listeners, you're in for a treat as I bring you Brendan Davies. Brendan Davies is an Ultra Trail Australian running champion and very well-known identity in the world of international Ultra Trail running. Brendan's credentials are impressive. He's got an amazing array of accolades in the world of ultra and trail running. Some of Brendan's career achievements to date include a top 10 finish in the Western States Endurance Run, a top 5 at the Ultra Trail Mount Fuji race, a top 20 at the arduous Comrades Marathon, a top 10 at the IAAF IAU 100 kilometre, that's right, 100 kilometre World Championship race. In that race, Brendan talks about what it requires to go at 4-minute kilometre pace for 100 Ks. It's very interesting. And domestically, Brendan boasts a very long array of domestic wins, including the Ultra Trail Australia, previously the North Face 100, and many, many other trail roads and running events. In addition, Brendan's been named the Australian Male Ultra Runner of the Year in 2012, 2015 and 2016. On today's episode, listeners, I explore the origins of Brendan's running career. It's a very interesting story that's actually very captivating, where Brendan went from being quite overweight for his frame to being a lean, mean run, maybe not mean, but lean and fast running machine. Brendan shares his philosophies around his own performance, what it takes to run fast and long. He talks about his coaching philosophies with his very successful Up Coaching business, and he shares around the joy that he gets from that. Brendan shares a quite funny story about Ryan Sandys, who's a well-known international trail runner. We touch on the World Trail Run Series. There's just so much, guys, in this episode. It's a double header following Lucy Bartholomew last week. So let's not wait any longer. Let's jump straight in with Mr. Brendan Davies. So, listeners, this one's been a little while coming. I've heard many listeners request for this gentleman to be a guest of the Physical Performance Show, and we've finally managed to line up diaries. And welcome to the Physical Performance Show, Brendan Davies.
Thanks, Brad. I'm very glad to be on. I'm a keen listener, and it's a privilege.
Mate, let's start with something a little bit fun. What's one thing that scares Brendan Davies?
Oh, gosh. I've got this deep fear that one day I'm going to be found out as a bit of a fraud or an imposter. I guess, I kind of stumbled my way into running, and, my whole career has been pretty much self-taught or self-coached, and, I've taken that philosophy into my coaching as well. A lot of the stuff I coach is from what I've learned along the way, but I still have that deep fear that someday somebody's going to tap me on the shoulder and go, do you really know what you're talking about? I don't know why I have that, but I guess it's something a lot of people might feel in their careers. But yeah, I still feel like sometimes I'm going to be found out as an imposter.
And Brendan, do you mean in terms of your performance as an elite, ultra and trail runner, or do you mean and runner in general, or do you mean in terms of your work as a well-esteemed coach?
Both. I'm still as much involved in my running as I've ever been, and I'm much more involved in my coaching these days too. But I've always done things pretty much my own way in running, and I've made decisions that are very much unorthodox along the way, and I guess I just don't always follow the tried and true, patterns of running careers, and whether that's been to my advantage or disadvantage, I don't know. But I guess it's also something I kind of have brought to my coaching to some degree as well. Like, I haven't ever been really coached in myself, like for a long period of time. I've had coaching experiences, and I've run under coaches for a small periods of time, but so I just feel like sometimes, am I doing things the right way, or am I doing things the best or the most optimal way? I'm not sure. I think I am, but I'm still waiting for that person one day to tap me on the shoulder and tell me otherwise.
Well, I don't think that tap's ever going to come, Brendan. I think that's, in terms of performance, I think that's a healthy position of humility, knowing that there's always more to learn and there's more to improve on. I think is probably consistent across peak performance. It's certainly something that I think there's that mix of confidence, but there's also that mix of humility, knowing that there's always more, right?
That's absolutely true, yes. Once you start to get too cocky and arrogant, I think that's where it can start to go downhill for a lot of athletes and coaches. So that's a really good point.
Brendan, your genesis story with running, in doing my preparation for today's recording with you, I really enjoyed some of your backstory. Let's go there before we go to the current realities for you. From my knowledge, you did some running as a child. You were quite gifted, but then you sort of, by your own writings, I think on a blog somewhere, you said in your 20s your youthful enthusiasm for running gave over to worldly temptations like team sports such as cricket, snooker, and you finished up eating party pies and drinking beer. Can you take us through the Brendan Davies genesis story from what it was like growing up as a child? Where'd you grow up? And let's do that journey.
Yeah, well, I grew up in inner city Sydney. I had a pretty regular kind of childhood, lots of sport, always team sports, soccer and football and cricket, stuff like that. I did little athletics as a child and teenager. I guess that planted the seeds of my, athletics. But actually, out of all the activities I did, that was probably the one I didn't enjoy the most. It was kind of like the one that I dreaded, actually. It was always a Friday night, and it always seemed to take all night, and I would have rather been at home watching football on TV. And I detested the throws and the jumps, and the only events I really liked was the long distance stuff. So you had to wait a long time between them at Little A's. So I don't think I really enjoyed the Little A's experience, although I did it. And then I did kind of give it away in my teenage years and took up other sports and things like that. Then I very much in my early 20s, as most people do, focused on my career. I'm a qualified teacher, and I worked as a teacher for, 15 years or so. So, I threw myself into my job in my early 20s and mid-20s. First of all, my studies, and then my first appointment as a teacher. So it's a bit of a life sucker teaching, but, I still managed to keep fit. Albeit, nowhere near as fit as I am these days. But I took up a few, team sports more for the social aspect, I guess, and cricket and snooker and things, and squash as well. I mean, those kind of things always end up with drinking beer and eating party pies at the end of the night. And I think it was, my mid-20s, I really started to kind of spiral a little bit down that real sedentary lifestyle that, it's very common in society, especially like affluent societies like Australia, where we can just let things go a little bit and lose track of the priorities of healthiness and well-being, and started to pile on the weight. Just using work as an excuse, as kind of thing, working long hours and not prioritising my own well-being. So, piled on weight, was, non-active, and I just started thinking about how I can improve my lifestyle. So I took up a little bit of jogging, and it wasn't really until I joined a running club in Sydney. It was a very recreational-based club at the time, and just started doing social runs and things like that, and I started to really enjoy it. And so I gave up all the team sports, and I started to look after my diet a lot more, and I started to become quite a regular at this club, and I was soon running outside just the club runs, and I was doing, lots of runs on my own, and I started to get quite good at running, started to lose the weight very quickly, as you do. A lot of people were worried about me because I was transforming before people's eyes, I guess. And, and I think in my early 30s, I started to take the sport a lot more serious. As far as the races I was going in, it wasn't just to complete or to take part; it was actually to be competitive, and that's the kind of journey that has been ongoing since then. I guess, really kind of kicked off even further when I moved out of Sydney and into the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, west of Sydney, in the trail running capital kind of thing, and I started to focus a lot more on trail running. And I was in the right place at the right time, and the trail running boom kicked in, and I just happened to be one of the better runners in trail running in Australia, and lots of opportunities opened up for me. And once those big opportunities opened up, that's when I started to take my running a lot more serious and started to treat myself more like a professional athlete.
And Brendan, so much there. So with the little A's, it's been such a wild ride for you. The little athletics, did you ever show any running promise? I know you said you enjoyed that the least out of all your recreational activities, but was there ever a moment or an epiphany where you went, I think I'm actually quite a decent runner?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I really only enjoyed the 800 and the 1500. All the other sprints, I was never fast. I'm only a small fella, so I was never good at the throws, and I couldn't jump to save myself. So I was basically there for the 815, and I knew I was a good long distance runner because I'd always excel in those ones, but also the cross country in the winter season. So I'd always just get to, your regional level. I think I made it to state once off basically very minimal training. So on talent alone kind of thing, looking back now, a little bit of training wouldn't have hurt my chances even more. But I always enjoyed long distance running. I like the solace of it and the solo aspect of it. And I always would kind of go through a running stage even when I wasn't, taking it serious as a sport. In my teenage years, I would still go out and jog on my own. Every now and then I'd go through phases, and I'd always look to running as a way to get fit quick or to lose a bit of weight for summer to, attract the girls and all that kind of thing. So, I always liked running as a sport. I've never felt it's ever been a chore or anything like that. And it's actually the one thing I knew ever since I was a very young boy that I was actually good at. I was actually better at that than most people. I knew I had that epiphany, I guess, as a child when I first won my first school cross country race. Oh, I'm actually good at something, and I've kind of held on to that all my life.
Isn't that interesting? And did you grow up in a sporty household, Brendan, or were you the child that was running around?
Yeah, no, we were always encouraged to take sport. My sisters and I, we all participated in lots of team sports as children. My sisters mainly dancing and things like that, more the artistic type realms. I always took part in the more physical kind of sports. Dad was a good sportsman as a kid. He was a good swimmer, and he tells me his grandfather was a good runner as well. My grandfather, his father. But not a real sporty family, but we valued sport as an activity, and definitely was encouraged to do lots of it as a child.
And Brendan, you mentioned through your 20s that you still kept some degree of running going, even while you, as you say, focused on your studies as a tertiary trained teacher, and then also the early stages of your teaching career. What did that actually look like for you practically? Would you go out for a 5-10K run here and there, or was there more structure to it, or how did that look for you through those years?
No, zero structure. I knew nothing about running. Me running was putting on the shoes and jogging out the door and running as fast or as slow as you wanted. And some days I'd be in a bad mood and run faster, and some days I'd be in a good mood and take it easy. But I also enjoyed like the feeling of improving. So I really would run the same route pretty much all the time, and I'd still record my times and have a feeling of, oh yes, I'm getting better at this. I'm enjoying this more, and I pushed the distance out a bit more as I'd get fitter. But I did the odd race still, like the City to Surf, like the big fun runs, just as fun things. But yeah, no, it was never structured like it is now. There wasn't any real goals, or there wasn't any real structure to my training or different types of training. It was pretty much all easy runs with, tempo runs, I guess you'd call them now. But yeah, never anything too specific.
And Brendan, you mentioned that you were the party pies and things took hold. I mean, it's in the public domain. I picked this up in researching for this, but at one point you're a smaller frame, but you're up to 85 kilos, and you said you transformed. Literally, you were transforming before people's eyes once you started to get consistent with your running, and that drop, the resultant body mass drop was how many kilos, Brendan?
Well, I'm down to like 58 at my racing weight, so yeah, a good 25, kilos, if not more. It was just all lifestyle fat basically, and once I fixed up my lifestyle and running is one of those sports that is just you can't carry around excess weight if you want to have a performance focus. So yeah, it just kind of stripped off real quickly, and it was funny because I was working as a teacher at a time, so I was like interacting with a lot of parents and other teachers, and they all thought I was ill, and I had some disease and things like that. Got lots of worried inquiries and things like that. But I just had to tell people, no, I've just taken up running, and now I see it with my own athletes that I coach. No one probably has done it the same degree as I did. I undertook that transformation very quick, and if I had someone kind of guiding me along the way, it wouldn't have probably happened that quick. But I've seen it happen before my own eyes with my own athletes that have come to me, with a goal to race this race or this race. And I just, as the kilometres ramp up, the training intensities ramp up, they just shed the weight so quickly.
Yeah. It's a normal byproduct. I've had a few people comment when I've been preparing for marathons to ask if I was all right, if I was ill, and it's like, no, it's just the gaunt runner look. But Brendan, let's talk about racing. You mentioned racing there. From my understanding, your first trail run was about 2007. I think it might have been the Fitzroy Falls Fire Trail Marathon.
Yes.
So that was your very first trail, is that right?
It was my very first trail race. I'd done, a few City to Surfs and things when I was a teenager. I think I may have done the odd, community fun run that may have had a bit of trail running in it. But that was my first marathon and definitely my first, major trail event. And, I loved it, but back then there wasn't that many trail events around. It was basically 6-foot track, Fitzroy Falls, and the Brindabella Classic in Canberra, and they're the only ones I really knew of. But now there seems to be a different one on every weekend. So, yeah, it's been a really interesting journey in itself in that sport, in the realm of trail running. I've seen it from its very beginning kind of stages in Australia all the way through to now. It's one of the most popular forms of running. But yeah, that was my first marathon and my first trail run.
And Brendan, you mentioned the boom, the nature of this being exploding, not just in Australia domestically, but worldwide. What do you think is driving that interest in trail running?
Look, I think as it's become more mainstream in the attention of people, it gets people's interest, and it's something that appeals to people just in its nature. Like, I don't think running on a road in a city has quite the same appeal as running through, pristine or scenic, locations in the bush or on trails in other countries. And I think, the internet and social media has driven that with people's, constant barrage of posts about where they've run and the beautiful photos and the experiences they've had out on the trails. So I think, one, it has a high interest value, but two, as soon as people experience it, they fall in love with the sport, because it is a real calming kind of sport. It doesn't have that same kind of feeling as road running or track running or any other form of running that I know. It has a very therapeutic aspect to it, and it has a very earthiness to it, and it feels right. It feels like a real instinctive and almost primitive thing to do. And I like to think that people just love getting dirty as well, and leaving behind the city or leaving behind the technology for a day or half a day, and leaving behind all those things that absorb our lives, and they can just let go of all that and experience what it feels like to be in nature, surrounded by sounds and smells and sights of things that are just so natural to us.
Brendan, that first marathon, that trail marathon in 2007, what did your world look like? I just want to take listeners through that journey. I find it fascinating because I imagine at that point you were still teaching, working with your teaching role, and then obviously things have changed since then. But what did your world look like leading into that marathon, and why did you even enter that first Fitzroy Falls marathon in the first place?
Yeah, definitely my life was much different. I was a 9 to 5 teacher, or teaching is more like 7 to 8 at night. But yeah, it was very much different priorities in my life. I was teaching full time. I was still very much involved in, forging my career back then as well. I was not a young teacher in 2007, but I was still in the beginning kind of phase, I guess. I was, much more involved in other things as well in my life. I had other interests. As running has taken over a lot of other things I've had to let go of. And so, yeah, I guess, it was more of an experiment or a curiosity to enter that race. I wanted, like a lot of things I've done in my career, I've done them because I've just been curious about them, and I've just wanted to experience new things. And I had a friend at the time actually he was a more senior runner than me, and he'd done it the year before, and he encouraged me to do it. And I was only a new runner, and I think I'd never even run a proper long run or anything on trail. So it was very much about, throwing myself in the deep end and having a go. And I've never been afraid to do that. So it was pretty much just about that, and having a new experience.
And Brendan, you then took on the 6 foot track in 2008. I think you finished 28th that year. Before you then went over to road ultras. What was your first foray into the trail ultra, if you like? Did you enjoy that change in distance from the marathon to the next 8Ks? Look, the 6 foot track, it's a classic event. It's very similar to it's a road runners event. I think, well, looking back then, I wouldn't have thought so, but now it seems a lot easier than it used to be. But I've always just thrown myself into new experiences. That's one of my kind of big philosophies as a runner and as a coach. Not everyone needs to be versatile, but it's good to have a healthy interest in other forms of running and experience other forms of running along the way. And even if it's just to discover that you're not suited to it or you don't like it, it's a good thing to just have a go. And I've never been afraid to try new things. I've done everything in running, from running 60-metre sprints on the track and running, I did the track 5,000-metre championships in New South Wales on Saturday, and I've gone all the way up to running. I've completed Coast to Cosy, 240 kilometres on the road, and I've done everything in between, from trail, mountain trails to road ultras to, so I just love the sport, and I love being versatile and challenging myself in new events. I guess getting back to your question, but I have always done things in a progressive manner. So I made sure that I had a lot of, half marathons under my belt before I really took up, road marathons. And then I really
got good at them or felt like I'd reached a high level in them before I stepped up to the ultras. I stepped up to road ultras a lot earlier in the piece because I believe that it was probably a little easier than stepping into trail ultras straight away. So I did the Narrabeen all-nighter, I think, in 2009, and it was really just an experiment. 100K, they used to have a 100K option back then, and I had no idea how I wanted to go, and I actually ended up winning it. Coming out of that, I got selected in the Australian 100K team. It was just, one of those things that I didn't even know existed. Oh, you could run 100K for Australia? Wow. And then they said, well, you've actually run a time that is good enough to be selected in the team. And I was like, wow, okay, well, sign me up, definitely. Oh, who wouldn't want to run for their country, especially after only really running for a couple of years, seriously. So,
yeah. And what was that year, Brendan? That was what year?
I think that was in January 2009. I ran the qualifier, and then in the same year, later in the year, I went over and did the Commonwealth. It was the Commonwealth Ultramarathon Championships, which had a 100K road option. So yeah, this is going back to 2009. I think it was 2009. It could be a bit sketchy, but I think I did the Narrabeen all-nighter in January 2009, and then I did the 100K Commonwealth Champs in September 2009. And from there, I actually performed quite well at that championships. I was 9th in 7 hours 31 back then, which was a pretty decent time. And I really didn't step up to trail ultras for a couple of years after that. I was always daunted by the idea of running ultras on trail, but also there wasn't that many events back then, not like there is now. It's only since the advent of the North Face 100 has that boom really kicked off in Australia. So even back in 2009, there were trail ultras, but they were very underground, and you didn't really know too much about them. You had to kind of know someone who knew someone that could get you an entry. Kind of thing, and you need to have a secret handshake to get in the door of one of those events. So it's that whole subculture has changed now. It's so much more, one, commercial, but also two, accessible for your average runner as well.
And the daunting aspect of it, was it just that underground nature, or was it more the dauntingness of the challenge? I don't think it would have been the challenge.
It was actually, the former. It was that little subculture that you never thought you could be a part of, because they were those guys. They were a bit crazy, a bit mental. They went out and ran, 100Ks for fun, and you'd read about them on forums. I used to read about them on Cool Runnings and things like that. I used to think, there's no way I could be cracking to a race like that. I'm not in those guys' league, or I don't know enough about it. But of course now there's so much information out there about it. It's so much more accessible for people to access that information, and things aren't as daunting as they used to be. There's a lot more people willing to share their information as well now.
I just finished watching the Barclays marathons Netflix documentary, and that still seems pretty daunting to me, Brendan.
Yeah, I mean that's an incredible event, because that's held on to its roots, and its roots are in how tough it is, and that's great. I really like the events that are held onto their traditions, and they're bucking the trend of, the commercialism. Not that that's a bad thing, don't get me wrong, but I like the old school ultras that do things just a little bit differently and kind of flirt with danger a bit. I really like that.
A quick break from Brendan Davies. If you missed last week's episode, the first of this Ultra Trail doubleheader featuring Lucy Bartholomew, then be sure to jump back and check out episode 88.
So my dad was always a runner. He did a lot of road marathons, and that's his way of, when he was backpacking, it was his way of seeing the cities. He just went and did the main marathons. And then I think, to be honest, he got older, and getting faster became less of an option and more of work. So he thought, I'm gonna stop doing the marathon whilst I've got some good times under my belt, and I'm gonna go further, which means I can go slower and I don't have to work quite as hard in the training. So for him, it was more of just like a step back in terms of expectation.
Whilst there, check out the archives 1 through to 88. There's some amazing physical performers and also inspiring ones that I've been able to bring you since we started the podcast back in March 2015. If you're enjoying the episodes, listeners, please consider sharing it with someone who that might directly relate to with regards to the sport or the information shared. So thanks in advance, guys, for sharing this episode today with someone that you know that would enjoy it, and other episodes as well. Let's jump back in with Mr. Brendan Davies. Brendan, just want to go for a little bit of your results, your achievements before we shift over to your philosophies, your training insights. But, mate, your bio is very impressive as per the top of the show. I mean, you're a prolific racer and you're a prolific podium finisher. What to you is the most special result of all the things that you've achieved representing Australia in mountain running, ultra roads, trails? What's the one event that, if you had to pick one, is the most significant to you, and why?
Oh, look, if I could answer that in kind of two parts, I think the one that really kind of put me in the focus as a ultra runner was winning the North Face 100 in 2013, and now it's Ultra Trail Australia. That was at a time, I've said it earlier, that I was just in the right place at the right time. That was at a time in Australia when trail running was on a massive upward swing. It still is on that upward swing, and I just happened to be right at the cusp of that, and winning that race really opened up a lot of opportunities for me to build my running career. So I was suddenly offered race invites overseas, and I got invited on the Ultra Trail World Tour, and a lot of support along the way to do that. And it just also brought me a lot of exposure as an athlete, which is as important as results. I think results are always more important, but you got to be accessible. You got to have good relationships with the right people, and you got to make yourself known to the public. And you have to. But luckily, that's always come naturally to me. I enjoy talking to people, so I've always embraced those opportunities. So winning that race was the thing that opened up to me those opportunities. But funnily enough, it wasn't a race that I ever intended. I never went into it with that intention to win. I was still very new to ultra trail running. I'd previously done, the North Face the year before, and I finished 4th that year. So I wasn't new to that race, but I was still new to ultra trail running. I'd done only maybe a handful. So I was still, very much a rookie of the sport, or so I thought, and now, I was thrown into the to the spotlight, I guess, of winning that race. It wasn't just winning the race, but I broke Kilian Jornet's record in that race as well. So it was like, wow, suddenly all these plaudits and things, and it was a bit hard to handle. It was kind of taken out from the running in the bush, and not many people knowing myself, and then suddenly, everybody was kind of, surrounding me, if you like, metaphorically. That's what it felt like. So yeah, it wasn't an event that I went in to win, but it was obviously a life-changing one, especially because it was in Australia. I think the event that has been most personally satisfying to me as an athlete was my Western States in 2014. I only got invited into that race because of that, North Face, just to highlight the impact that the North Face win had. I then got invited on the Ultra Trail World Tour and got an Ultra Trail World Tour spot in Western States in 2014, and I trained properly for that race, even though I was still working as a full-time teacher. And and all that, I took my training a lot more seriously, and I finished 8th in that race. It was a very competitive year. There was only 15 minutes between 4th and 8th. And I had a really one of those days where everything pretty much just went to plan, and it's so unusual in an ultra, especially a 100-mile trail ultra in the heat of California. So it was one of those days where I kind of solidified in my mind, yes, I can do this. If I train properly and focus properly, I can be one of the best in the world. So that was the other big race for me, and it gave me a lot of self-belief going forward.
So the North Face 2013 in the Western States thereafter, and having that confidence that was birthed out of that Western States result, I guess at that point you weren't expecting someone to tap you on the shoulder and tell you that you're an imposter.
Not so much, but I still feel like it's going to happen.
Brendan, with the Ultra World Tour, just for the listeners that might not be familiar with that, that scene, what does that look like? The events, what's the culture look like on those events? Insights from someone that's been on the tour.
Yeah, look, I've got mixed feelings about it to some degree because, just going forward from 2014, those good results, I threw myself even more into the tour in 2015. And back then the tour, to be part of it, you had to run 3 of the races. So I did 300 milers in 2015, basically. And it did end up catching up with me, and I kind of burnt out a little bit. And so, the Ultra Trail World Tour, it's definitely brought a professionalism to the sport, and it's a good thing because it gives a lot of credence to ultra trail running. It's a funny sport because there's no actual, governing body of the sport as such. So there's no Athletics Australia or IAAF overseeing the whole sport. So it's very much all commercial enterprise running the sport, much like, say, Ironman as a brand. Ultra Trail World Tour operates kind of like under the same model. So it can be a little bit, there's some definite traps to be involved in it. And I think a lot of athletes have overcommitted to calendars and have come out the other side not being benefited by that. So I experienced that anyhow. So I think, it's given a lot of good opportunities for athletes to step up their running and take it professional and receive a lot more support. But I think, like anything, there's traps to that as well. But generally, what's not to like about, something taking you all around the world to new locations and new places? I think that's the initial attraction anyway for me. It was.
Yeah, well said. Brendan, just before we shift in the performance round, your road 100K results, to put listeners in perspective, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, your PB's somewhere in the 6 hours and 55 minute mark for the 100Ks. Is that right?
Actually, no, I need to probably update my blog. I set a new PB last year at the World Champs in Spain. I did 6:44. So that's, 4:03 pace. Yeah.
So so listeners, that's 4 minute.
Yeah. And
3 second kilometre pace.
I was 10th. That was my 4th World 100K Championships. I'd finished 11th, 12th and 19th, so to get in that top 10 finally was a massive, massive day. A big personal achievement for me that day.
Yeah, I mean, some listener questions that have come through is, naturally around fueling, nutrition. I know you'd answer this a lot, but just for the benefit of, listeners, Brendan, when you're racing something like 100Ks, what is your nutrition strategy to keep knocking out those 4 minute K pace?
Yeah, so road is much different to trail. So the nutrition strategy changes race to race and always has to be tailored to the race dynamics as well. So how many aid stations are there? How far apart are they? The elevation involved. So trail runs, in mountains, you can definitely get away with eating a lot more solids and a lot more traditional type food. But in a road ultra, the World Championships are usually on a 10K loop, so you do that 10 times over, or a 5K loop 20 times, so you have a lot of opportunities to refuel. I just keep it simple. And because it's only 6 hours, you need fuel, but you don't need to take in a lot of fuel because I've trained my body to be able to store a lot as well. Usually just keep it to gels and really fast-acting fuels. And as long as I can keep them coming in often, they'll usually sustain me for the entire time. That's right. So they offer a wide range of products. They've been with me, since 2013, I think. So, yeah, I mean, they've got their slow-burning fuels and then, like their powders and that you mix with water. They're great for trail ultras, and bars and things like that are great for trail ultras. But then, in shorter races and more kind of intense races, you need that fast-burning fuel a little bit more. So, yeah, they offer a great range of gels and things like that as well.
Listeners, a quick break from Brendan Davies. Today's episode, as always, is lovingly brought to you by Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through the doors of Pogo Physio to cross their physio finish line. What's that? Well, it's real simple. That's a high five moment we give you where we tell you that you've finished rehabilitation, you don't need to see us again, you're back to your physical best, doing the things that you love. Listeners, we do this through some industry-first initiatives, including the very popular 2, 6 and 12-week finish line fixed fee unlimited access programs, and more recently also our wellness booster packs, which see patients of Pogo receiving care including clinical Pilates, access to state-of-the-art equipment including Alter G, anti-gravity treadmill running, hands-on therapy such as remedial massage and physiotherapy, all from a very low and very cost-effective $195 per month for the bronze booster as an example. Listeners, if you would like to find out more about Pogo Physio, our 1-hour initial consultations, our finish line programs, wellness boosters, or even our Pogo Partners industry program, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. Let's jump back with Brendan Davies. Brendan, let's do a performance round. So, you ready for me to throw a few questions at you in rapid succession?
Yes, go for it.
So, Brendan, the training session you most dislike?
It's a funny one. I change week to week, but probably I would say, easy runs. They're the hardest ones to do sometimes. You have to be the most disciplined about them. It's easy to get motivated by a track session or a long run, but easy runs sometimes are the hardest ones to get out the door for.
It's so true. I've just finished researching around the 80-20 running, making sure that the slow runs don't become moderate pace, and it's just a habitual pace that we can easily fall into, which is above easy, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think it's a bit of a trap that a lot of runners make. They run their easy runs too hard and never, rested enough their quality sessions.
Yeah. Training session you most love. Is there one particular run that you just love, Brendan?
Yeah, I call it my hour of power. It's a really hard session, and you leave knowing you're indestructible or you've got a lot to work to do, basically. And it's 3-minute efforts at VO2 kind of intensity with only 60 seconds rest, jog in between, and you do that 15 times. So that's an hour's worth of work, or 45 minutes with 15 minutes of jogging recoveries in there. But that's an hour session that just leaves you absolutely smashed. But it can give you the best feeling in the world if you've nailed it. So yeah, I love doing that one.
How often would you do that one, Brendan? Just out of interest?
I'd probably throw it in the last phase of my training cycles, maybe twice in the last month, and also maybe once. A couple of months out from a big race just to see where I'm at, because nothing can compare to that session that I found that tells you a lot, much about your fitness.
Yeah, no hiding. Favourite pre-race meal, Brendan? What's your go-to there?
Slow burning fuel like oats, porridge, depending on the race length. If it's an ultra, definitely, porridge and slow release carbs. But if it's a shorter race, I'll usually just have a cup of coffee and maybe a piece of toast, something light.
And how soon, or how much before, how long I should say, before the event starts?
Oh, look, always, an hour and a half at least. For a big brekkie, even sometimes 2 hours before.
And Brendan, your sleep hygiene, are you quite disciplined around that? What's your, go to bedtime and get up out of bedtime normally?
No, I'm terrible at this. It's one of the biggest weaknesses in my whole training regime. It's not great, mainly due to work, because my work hours are a bit disjointed. I run group sessions 3 days a week, and I'm out the door like 5 a.m. each morning, and then I usually get home and work on the computer with online clients or on the phone with online clients, and then I'm back out the door for afternoon sessions. So, and then when I get home, I usually find I've got a stack of inquiries or just questions to answer and things like that. So often I'm not in bed till late. It's just a little bit about discipline and just bad habits have formed. But that's something I really could improve in. That's for sure.
I'm putting my hand up too. Who's the athlete that you most admire? Brendan Davies, and why?
Oh my goodness, that's changed over the years a lot. I really admire great endurance athletes. They'll always have my soft spot. So Killian Jornet and guys like Rob Craw. Even going back in history, guys I've never run with or ran against. Like Scott Jurek and Cliff Young and just the great endurance athletes of the past. And they've always, but now these days, look, I love guys like, the new trend in ultra runners like Jim Wormsley and fellas like that really just want to take on the kind of tried and true path in ultra running. They're trying to bring it to bring that track mentality to ultra running, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I love the attitude of that. As long as they respect, I think, the race and don't become habitual DNFers. I think it's a good thing, because it's going to take the sport to the next level and raise the bar in performance. But I'm also inspired by athletes I coach, just seeing their journeys. They're the biggest inspirations, I think, and they've kept me going over the last couple of years, that's for sure. Just seeing them improve and running with them, training with them. And, I coach lots of athletes, from recreational runners, mums just wanting to complete their first 10K, or all the way up to elite level. So, I get to experience the whole spectrum, and I'm inspired by all of them as equally, to be honest. I think, it's great to watch someone undergo that journey and be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there a mantra that you use when you race?
Yeah, look, it changes race to race, but I think, in general, in my general running kind of phase, it's train hard to race easy. I think, you do all the hard work in training. You can't expect to come to race day, and it's not going to be easy unless you've trained hard. So there's that one. And then in races as well, I've always thought, well, this is meant to be tough, but I am tougher. So that's one that I kind of repeat to myself a lot in ultras as well. But also, as I've gotten older and wiser, it's all about stay patient and things like that, and relax, make it feel easy. They're the kind of little mantras I take with me these days.
Best recovery tip, Brendan? What's that one?
Oh, beer? I don't know. It's another area I wouldn't call it a strength of mine. But I've always just thought getting out and being active is the best form of recovery. Not hard active. I mean, just gentle activity. So getting on a bike or going for a walk or a hike or a light jog is sometimes the best form of recovery, I think. And I've never been into ice baths or anything too scientific like that. I just like to keep it simple and just keep myself moving around.
Yeah. Your worst injury, Brendan, what's that been?
You know what, Brad, I've been very lucky. I can honestly say I've never had an injury. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's me just being, a little bit stubborn and running through the niggles and and things like that. But yeah, look, I've never had like a major injury. I've had a few things that have kept me from completing, my usual program, if you like, because I've had to just ease off a bit. But I've always managed little niggles pretty well. I've always done things myself, like self-massaged and rolled and lots of little things like that, home maintenance things. But I've never had a major injury, so I've been really, really blessed throughout my career.
And I think there are outliers like you, Brendan, like Dean Canazis, who has never had an injury, and it's incredible with the amount of miles and Ks you guys run. So I think there are a few outliers, and I reckon you might be one of them.
Well, I think sometimes the amount that I do run probably keeps me strong, and I've always focused on preventative things. And early on in my career, I transformed my running style once I read a lot more about good efficient technique and running efficiency. And I did a lot of barefoot running, and I only run in like minimalist shoes. So Innovate are my shoe sponsors, and I've only ever worn Innovate in my career. So I think that's had a lot to do with it too. I've got a good running economy and an efficiency that doesn't really bring on injury. And the amount of kilometres I do, especially where I live now in the mountains, I'm doing hills every time I basically step out the door. So I'm pretty strong as well. So and mixing up my training, a lot of trail, a lot of road, but never too much of one or the other. So it's been good to me.
And certainly technique is so critical in terms of minimising injuries. It's one of the factors. Brendan, last couple of questions, performance round. How would you describe being in the zone, and when was the last time you were in the zone? Might have been the 5K on the weekend.
I was in the hurt zone, that's for sure. Had my coaching Christmas party the night before, so let's just say I was experiencing a bit of suffering of the self-inflicted type. But in the zone, I guess it was only about a month, just over a month ago in America, I did a 100-mile race in the desert in Arizona. It was called the Javelina 100. It was on the Ultra Trail World Tour, and it was a big event. It was my A race for the year. And particularly it was a bigger event because my other A race of the year, I only usually have 2 A races. The other one was Comrades in South Africa, and I wouldn't say it was a bad race, Comrades, but I underperformed, particularly compared to the year before where I finished 19th, and I was really looking at stepping into the top 10 this year. But the uphill nature of the course didn't suit me as much as the downhill from the year before. So yeah, I underperformed a little bit. So I went to Javelina with that. Right, this is my other A race. I want to actually, nail this one. I want to walk away very satisfied with my achievement here. So, yeah, everything I did in the lead up and all the little 1%ers I ticked off and got over there and made sure I prepared well and, was well rested in the week leading up to it and did all the little things right. And I was in the zone that day. Even though in the zone, man, I went off course for a little bit, which often is the case. You can get so focused that you lose track of the now, the present. So, these little things help. But, just the fact that I got over that quickly and I just moved on. I didn't hang on to that during the race. Told me that I was in the right mindset. I'd come to that race with a good, flexible and adaptable kind of mind. And yeah, I went really well. It was a hard race. It was really, really hot and dry, and I did it in 14 hours and finished third, so I was pretty stoked about that.
Another podium for Brendan Davies, Mr. Consistent. Brendan, last question in the performance round. What's the funniest thing you've ever seen while either racing or training?
Oh my goodness. That's a good question. I wish I'd had some preparation time. Let me.
Can I help you out? I did hear an anecdote that you nearly ran into Ryan Sanders on a trail once when he was stopping for a nature call.
Oh yeah, that was in Western States. Yeah. So the second year, I think, I in 2015, I think, yeah, Ryan had a bad case of the runs that day. He had to stop a couple of times, and being an elite, there was no going 100 metres off the course for him. It was 1 metre, if that. So I got to see all of Ryan's glory that day. But I've got a funny story actually. In 2012 at the North Face 100, so that was the year when Killian and Seb Chagneau was out here, and there was some big names, and so they were the dudes, and so they took off at the start, and they were just leading from the get-go. And as I got to about the 20-kilometre point of the race, we were going through a very technical section of trail. Killian comes up behind me, and I'm like, wow, what's he doing behind me? Did he get lost or he actually stopped, I found out later, to take off his long sleeve skin that he started the race with. And just as he was like behind me coming up in the race, there was a photographer taking photos. And it was such a great moment because I was still in front of him at that point. And they snapped me just as I was, ahead of Killian in that race. So that was a really cool moment as well.
Have you got that one blown up on the wall, Brendan?
No, I'm too tight to buy the photo, so I've still got the grainy one with the watermark over it. That's about it.
Brilliant, Brendan. Well done. You're out of the performance zone. As a coach, up coaching, I've had physio patients of mine here at the practice tell me about it. It's come I regularly see elements on social media. You've got a great following. Brendan, what do you think as a coach are the staples of a good running program?
Oh, look, it all depends on the goal race and the goal of the athlete for that race. But I don't think you can, as a distance running coach, I don't delve into the sprints or really even middle distance, although I have a couple of middle distance runners. I think, the number one session is your long run. There's no beating the aerobic element of running. It's across every distance. Pretty much, and you have to build your aerobic capacity through long, easy runs. So lots of people, busy in their lives, and they ask me, what session should I prioritise if I have to do a session for a week? If I'm too busy to get out for the other ones, I say always make sure you get your long run done. Because the rest is important as well from a performance angle. But if you can't even run, if you don't have the aerobic engine to run, then over a length of time you're not going to get anywhere. So I think your long run is important. And then as to performance goals of athletes vary, that's when you start to prioritize the lactic threshold sessions and the strength sessions. I think are important for trail runners, and obviously the threshold sessions are important for like track runners and road runners a little bit more. It's individualized always, but what I bring to my coaching squads is a mix of everything, because I have a philosophy. Well, it's not going to hurt you if you do it. So always vary around my sessions from fartlek to hill repeats to tempo running to track running, all with different slightly objectives for each session as well. So I like to touch on all different elements of physiology of running, as well as making sure athletes get out for their long runs, not just on road but on trail. And that kind of thing.
Yeah, brilliant. And Brendan, if you could boil everything you've learnt as a coach and also as an athlete yourself into one bit of advice, what would that one solitary piece of advice be for listeners who are out there across many endeavours looking to pursue their physical best?
Be consistent and be patient. That's it. Running is a sport that you won't improve overnight. It takes a long time to develop, your body, your strength, your aerobic capacity, and you can't expect too much too soon. You just have to keep chipping away at it. Try new things, yes, but don't try new things without giving the old things a chance to work. So it's all about being patient, being consistent, and just making it a lifelong journey. Always thinking about thinking about as a long-term plan, not just a short-term thing.
Yeah, it's great. I remember one of the former guests, Brendan, I can't remember the exact guest, but they said every session was a building block, a stepping stone, every single session. And I thought that was such a keen insight.
Absolutely. You work in phases as a coach up to a race, but you always will take that phase that you went through into your next one as well.
Yeah. Brendan, last couple of questions. Bucket list, what's on that inside sport and outside of sport?
Well, inside, I just want to continue growing as a coach, developing my skills and knowledge. I've really been lucky in that sense where I've had a couple of really good athletes that have stretched me in my, so that forced me to step outside of that kind of recreational world a little bit, where you're providing good, solid programs for runners and into that elite realm. So I'm looking at getting a little bit more involved in that, and I coach a couple of really high quality athletes that are enabling me to do that. So I've got Kelly Emerson, one of Australia's best trail runners, a lady I'm working with towards, Olympics, a selection one day, Marnie Ponton, who just won the state 5,000 metre championship down here. So yeah, I want to develop that side of of running, I guess. As I'm an old man now, I'm 40, so I can't have illusions of going on forever as an athlete, and I'm slowly kind of transforming myself more and dedicating myself more to the coaching. So definitely that, and also just in my life it's more just about experiencing, the regular things that you should be experiencing in life, like holidays without having to worry about work, and trying to let go of work a little bit more, and handing over other things to other people to do instead of trying to do everything yourself. They're the kind of things I'm prioritising, yeah.
Brilliant. The growth of life. Brendan, fun question lastly. 3 people at your dinner table, living or past. Who's at Brendan Davies and why?
Oh, another hard question. Look, I'd have to throw a runner in there because it just make the conversation so much similar to what my usual dinner parties are like these days, because I don't have much of a social life outside of running. So probably someone like Rob DiCostello would be great, Steve Monaghetti or Benita Willis. I really love those kind of athletes. Benita Willis, owns every Australian record from basically 1,500 metres up to marathon. So, I mean, wow, just imagine picking her brain for a little while. That'd be fantastic. And then someone totally left field, like a musician or someone like Beck. I really like those kind of creative types that are constantly changing their angles and their kind of styles. So anyone that can't sit still for long, I find them fascinating people. And third person, so I've got, Benita Willis, probably, Beck, that's a bit out there. But also, someone a bit wild. So it'd have to be someone that's just done things a little bit, unorthodox in life. I wouldn't say a criminal, but I'd say someone that's, a bit edgy. And I just can't think of someone who kind of fits that at the moment, but I'm sure it'll come to me.
What about the Barkley Marathon's race director?
That would be the type of person, yeah. He would be exactly the type of person. Yeah, I'd have him at a dinner party. Someone that lights a cigarette to start a race and, doesn't tell you where the race start is, and still believes in your race entries that you have to send in by mail. I love that. That's great.
Beautifully and simple. And just on the fun side, Libby Maxwell, our much-loved practice manager here at Pogo Physio, Brendan, wants to know if you will come and run the Mudgee Bar Park Run and also the Leamington Eco Challenge.
I'd love to. There's so many races I'd love to do, and I love park run as a concept, by the way, as I'm sure you do as well. And I always will incorporate it in my travels, and I've done quite a few all over the place. And, yeah, I'd love to come up Mudgee Bar and see Libby and Steve, all those Queensland guys that I know, and the Eco Challenge. I think I was actually invited to that one year, but I couldn't do it. So it's on the bucket list along with about 100 other races.
Yeah, I'm sure. But Libby, that'll make her morning, so her day. So that's great. Brendan, lastly, the physical challenge for the week issued by the guest, which is you this week. What's Brendan Davies' physical challenge to listeners going to be?
Oh, look, this one's probably not what people are expecting, but yesterday, and I do it quite often, I go out for hikes. And I think the challenge for me is if you're a runner, go out for a 3-hour hike and go and experience what it feels like just to slow things down, because you'll be pleasantly surprised at not just the physical demand of hiking, but also the feedback you get from your body about hiking and also just what's around you in nature. It's quite strange to actually be able to see things and experience things on the same kind of route that you've probably run 1,000 times that are so much different just because you're hiking. So, yeah, that's my challenge. Go out for a long hike.
Excellent. And listeners, if you take on Brendan's challenge for the week, do let Brendan and myself know. You can find us on social media. Brendan, where can listeners follow your journey more, find out more about Up Coaching? Where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so my own journey, I've got a blog. It's not really maintained that regularly, but I kind of chuck things up there every now and then. It's just brendandavies.com.au. And there from, I've got Instagram, and I think if you're interested in my training, because I don't hide anything, it's all out in the open. I have a Strava account, which is, pretty much everything is on there. And also, just my Facebook account, it's all public. So yeah, if you want to waste your time following me, go for it. They're the little things, and I'll throw things up there that I find interesting as well. With Up Coaching, it's not me. I've got a great team of coaches that work with me, or from all around Australia too. So, I have as much locally coached people as I do online coach people, and you can just look at that information on upcoaching.com.au. And if you're interested in taking your running, not necessarily to the next level, but if you want some guidance or you want to reach a goal, just drop us an email and I'll get back to you.
And listeners, we'll tag all this up in the show notes, so jump over. And Brendan Davies, you get to tag an athlete. Who do you think would be interesting to hear from on the Physical Performance Show?
Have you had Lucy Bartholomew on yet?
We have, Brendan. We're going to do a double header. So we're releasing yours and Lucy's back to back.
I was going to say, because she just won a big event in South Africa. What about Kelly Emerson? Have you had Kelly on yet?
No, not Kelly yet. So we'll have to chase her up, eh?
Yeah, well, Kelly has been one of our best performing females. She's up there with Lucy, for many years, and she was 5th in Ultra Trail Mont Blanc. So, massive race result for Kelly last year. And she's a really interesting person to talk to as well.
Fantastic. Well, we'll have to we'll see if we can chase Kelly up. And Brendan Davies, you're an absolute gentleman, and I now understand why you've got such a strong following, and that's you've been gracious with your time. Wish you all the best, mate, for the event. So I disagree with you. I don't think you're an old man now at all, and I think you got plenty of great results still ahead, and also all the best with the coaching.
Thanks for the vote of confidence, Brad, and I really appreciate being given the opportunity to be on the show.
So, listeners, there you have it. Another episode of the Physical Performance Show. I trust you enjoyed it. And if you did, please let Brendan and myself know. Tag us in on social media. Let us know what you liked, what you took from it, what your key learnings were. It would mean the world to both myself and to Brendan. Listeners, if you'd like to get the Physical Performance Show into your earbuds each and every week, be sure to hit subscribe from within your favourite podcast player or app. If you've been enjoying the show, listeners, then please consider taking the time to leave a review for the Physical Performance Show. Reviews help the show grow and also get into the earbuds of fellow people who, just like you, are looking to pursue their physical best performance. A massive thanks to a faithful listener this week who has left a review, and that's Justine. Justine rated the Physical Performance Show 5 stars over on iTunes, and Justine commented, "Love this concept for showcasing the elite and awesome athletes. Inspiring and interesting insights. I'm subscribed." Justine, that's great. Thank you for leaving the time, taking the time. It helps enormously. And listeners, if you'd like to do so, iTunes, you can click ratings and review. It needs to be from a desktop computer and rate away 1 star or 5. Lastly, guys, if you are into running, then be sure to check out my Amazon running and jogging bestseller, You Can Run Pain Free. It's 330 pages, packed full of a 5-step method that'll walk you through doing just what the title says, ensuring that you enjoy injury-free and faster running. Listeners, You Can Run Pain Free is available on iBooks and also Audible. And of course, it's available in good old-fashioned paper via Pogo Physio inside Australia and shipping internationally through Amazon. You can also pick up your copies via the Pogo Physio website. Big thanks to the very good folk who make this show possible each and every week. That is Daryl Misson, audio engineer, Sophie Walker on all things podcast administration, and Matthew Olding on all things podcast graphic design. Listeners, coming up in next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, I catch up with another runner. It's a theme at the moment, and that is Mr. Clay Dawson. Clay accomplished something in 2017 which was quite remarkable. He ran 3 sub-2:30 marathons in the space of just several weeks. You're going to really enjoy this episode. It's an interesting look into a great Australian up-and-coming athlete. So be sure to tune in next week to hear Mr. Clay Dawson. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.